Alright, so moving onward, let's go into the masking tab now. Now, I will apologize in advance. I already know that this video is going to go a little bit longer, but there's a lot that you can do in this with this feature of the tool, so I kind of want to go into depth and detail just to show the power that it has. So I do apologize, this video will probably run a little bit longer. But let's go ahead and dive right in. So you'll notice when you first go over to this tab, you've got two buttons. One is to toggle a preview, which you need to do if you want to actually view your masks in viewport. So you actually do have to do this. When you do this, you'll see everything goes black, or it may show a mask that's currently applied to it. But regardless, you should see it change from whatever your normal view is. So make sure that you've toggled the preview on. And then another important thing is make sure that you have texturing turned on in your viewport. So I have texturing turned on and I have this turned on. Now we can move on to creating a new texture mask. So I can call this whatever I want. Again, I'll just call it test. Alright, so you'll see here that we get a group that I can collapse. And in here we have a few options. One is we can preview this particular mask. We can add a new layer to the mask. And we can delete the overall mask. Alright, so the first thing that we'll do is we'll just go through each one of these one by one. And we'll just look at the different options there. Also, note you can create as many of these as you want. But if I, for example, if I try to create something, a mask that's the same name as another mask, it won't let you do it. Masks do have to have unique names, so keep that in mind. If I press OK, you'll see nothing happened, because I had the same name in there as one that already exists. But if I just leave this one as new mask, press OK, I'll get that one to pop in. And then if I want, I can just delete it. You'll see this come up. This is, we'll go into this later, but in the background, all these are the, if I bring the hybrid, oh, well, I can't. Here, I'll go ahead and click delete nodes for now. All it's really using in the background is a combination of these 3D textures and utility nodes. So basically it's asking if you, when it's asking if you want to keep the nodes or delete the nodes, it's asking if you want to delete the 3D texture nodes and utility nodes that it created, or if you want to keep them for your own personal stuff. But we'll get into that later. For now, just know that that's what it does in the background. Anyways, so we'll let's start going through these. So the first mask that we have available to us is the slope mask. So I'll go ahead and click on add mask layer. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to preview the mask. What this does is it hooks up the this mask to the shader that it is that's visible on here right now. And then we can just move in. So we see here on the top we have a limit minimum slope. So what this does is it will limit so like the flatter areas, it'll make it so objects will not spawn on the flatter areas. And then of course you can adjust it. And then, you know, as we adjust this, we get more or less objects that will spawn on the flatter sections. There is a sharpness slider on here. Unfortunately, it doesn't really do a whole lot on the slope masks, but it is in there. Typically, though, I just recommend leaving it all the way up to 10 for now. we can turn that off. We also have a limit maximum, which will pretty much do the opposite of what limit minimum did. So now we get objects that stay off of the steep slopes, which is a more, natural thing that you'll do probably more often than limit minimum. You can have both of them turned on, but if you want to do some weird stuff like that, it does allow you to do both. Typically you'll only be using one of these though at a time. Alright, so that pretty much covers the slope mask. The next one is we have the elevation mask. So I can go ahead and click on add layer. I'll go ahead and just delete that one for now, the slope mask, and we'll just we'll concentrate here on the elevation mask. So you'll see here everything went white. That's because we're not limiting anything. So it says internally, okay, no limitations. You can scatter anywhere on this mesh. But we can go in here and we can say limit how objects will spawn on the top edges of your terrain. So as you can see, as I move this down, the top parts of the terrain get darker, which means we won't get any objects that spawn up there. So if I do something like this, and then the sharpness actually does work much better here on the elevation mask, for example. So we'll get slightly less stuff in the grayer areas and then more as we get into the wider sections. So there's that, and then the limit minimum pretty much does the exact opposite, as you'd probably imagine. And then I can adjust the sharpness here. That'll just say we won't get any objects that spawn down here in the corner, or down here on the lower elevations. And then let's see, we'll go ahead and delete that one. We'll move onwards to the camera field of view mask. So this is mainly going to be useful if you're doing a still image. And let's say, so for example, in here I have a shot camera, and we'll just go ahead and switch over to that now. Oops, sorry. So here we are in the shot cam. So in here we have a distance, and then if I just go ahead and do that, increase the distance, and oops, I'll go back over here into the other view, so you can see the camera's right here, and so this is pretty much just going to make a mask that says objects will only spawn in the view of the camera. And then we can adjust this distance here, so to make it go further back or less. And then we also have the overscan parameter, which if I go back over here to this camera, we'll see here on the resolution gate off to here on the sides, we'll see how it bleeds over a little bit. That is controlled by this overscan amount. So you can see we can increase this and we'll get a little bit more room here on the edges of the resolution gate. This is useful so that way, if you're scattering large objects, you won't just have missing chunks here on the sides of objects. So yeah, that is the bulk of the camera field of view mask. Again, like I said, this is mainly going to be useful for still images, but if you wanted to use this with an animated camera, something that I would say you could do is let your animation play along, grab your camera, delete it, delete the keys on it, and then you can just add in another camera mask and link the camera to it, and then adjust it to those settings, and then you just keep doing that further and further along your camera's path, and that should limit the sections to where only your camera is visible, or what your camera can see. Cool. So that is the camera FOV mask. We will move on to the custom. So what we have in here is just a text. And what this is mainly for is, if we go over here, like I said before, all this really is it's using 3D textures in the background. So if I go in here and I create a solid fractal, for example, and I will rename it. If I can just move stuff over. Just call it TMP. And then what I can do is I can grab this final output, and then if I do TMP, you can see how this turned red. This means that there's been no valid connection made so far. And what you need to do is you need to type in the name of the mask and then the output. So if we look over here, the output on this is going to be out color. That's the out that I want to use. So if I just type in temp.out color, that just turned green, saying that this is good and ready to go. And now you can see over here, my preview is updated, and now I can see my temp mask, or my fractal mask here on the terrain. So I can go in here now, minimize that, go over here to the settings, and now I can just start adjusting the mask to get it to look more like what I would like it to be. So for example, something like this. And now you can use this as more of like a noise, just to help break up the pattern of how objects are getting scattered on your terrain. So, and again, this is only going to work with stuff that's here in the 3D textures tab. And also if you're trying to do stuff like with anything in here, so like you could have the output of a, like if I wanted to, I could create like a multiply node and then give the output of the multiply apologies. I could put the output of the multiply node in here and it would work. It would be just fine. As long as all the previous nodes in your shading network are 3D nodes, it'll work just fine. It also works well with if you're using projection shaders. So anything that's being used as a projection will work just fine as well. So moving onwards, that's pretty much it for all the different nodes in here. One thing that I will mention now is your preview in here inside of Maya may not be very accurate. It may be misleading. This can be caused because this is something that I learned and it's rather annoying. For pretty much all the 3D textures listed in here, with the exception of the snow mask, what Maya does internally for Viewport 2.0 is it bakes the 3D texture down to a 2D map and then applies that 2D map to your mesh, and then that's what you see in the viewport. And so that can be misleading if you don't have any UVs on the object that you're trying to scatter on, or if you don't have proper UVs set up. So what I recommend in the event that you don't have any UVs, or your UVs may not be optimized, is to go up here into your render view, switch over to either Maya Software or Maya Hardware 2.0, and just do a render from your current camera, and this will give you the accurate view of what your texture is actually going to look like and how it will affect your objects that you try to scatter. So that's something to just keep in mind. I usually do this now. Sometimes I find Hardware 2.0 to be a little bit faster, so I'll use that. And I'll just run a render with, this tab active and just check to see how my mask is working actually in the background. So this is rather unfortunate that you have to do it, but, it's just something that you've got to do if you're not going to use surfaces that don't have UVs, or you just haven't set up proper UVs on them yet. So there's that, and then let's see. So that pretty much covers all of these guys. Next thing that we'll talk about is the ability to blend them together. So for example, I can grab here a slope mask and an elevation mask, and I can start to blend these two together. So something that can be helpful is when you have multiple masks in here and you want to sort of just concentrate on one, you can just view the individual layer of mask layer. So you can just press view, and now you're only going to be viewing this layer. So now if I press limit, now I've got all my stuff in here, and I'm only looking at this slope mask. And then once I decide, okay, this is good enough, I like what this is, and then I can go over here to my elevation mask, view it, and I can say, well, I don't really want it to spawn down at the bottom, and I'll just have a little bit of a blend there. And then let's just say that this is good enough. I'm happy with this. And now if I go and press preview, you notice we don't really get what we want. So that is because you have these different blending modes here. And right now it's set to add, so it's adding the mask from here to this one here. What you want to do is change the blending modes here. So the way that the blending modes work is this, whatever your blend mode is here, this layer will get added to this layer. Or if I switch this over to minus, this layer minus this layer. So it's always it works from top down, and this the blend mode here will always affect this result to this result. So if I switch this over to multiply, I'm going to get pretty much what I wanted, which was nothing down here at the bottom and my slope mask here on the top. And then let's say I'm happy with this. I'll just go over here just to double check, do a quick render. This is what it looks like. Cool, looks good enough. Now I can go over here to the scatter tab. I have an emission mask here. And remember, the mask that we did here was test. So I can select test, and I've actually just noticed that this is a bug here. This shouldn't be here because we deleted that other mask. That's something that I'll need to fix, and we'll do so. But anyways, so I just select test on here. So there's that emission mask, and now if I just go ahead and scatter, give this a second. And now you'll notice we don't get any objects down here. Same thing with this guy. I can actually go back over here to this mask tab, toggle the preview, and you'll notice only on sections that are, where we've got flatter slopes, that's where our objects have spawned. Anywhere else that's got a black mask on it doesn't have any objects. And again, just as a reminder, if you get any possibilities where you're seeing objects get spawned on sections where they shouldn't, do what I said here, grab a render and see what the mask is actually looking like, because I guarantee that's going to be the issue. You're just not getting an accurate reading in the viewport. Cool. So that covers that. And then, you know, like I said, you can keep going with these. So if I add the camera FOV, slot this in, and again, this one's set to add, so it's just going to add white to wherever the camera's view is. And so if we want this to blend together better, we should set this to this mask to multiply, so it'll multiply this one. And now we only get areas where this camera is actually seeing. Cool. So that's all that. And then here, just to show you guys this in the hypershade now. If we go and just grab all this, graph it all out. This is the graph that this particular mask layer has made. So this result right here is what we're seeing there in the viewport. So yeah, like I said, all native Maya nodes. I've just given you guys a cleaner UI to actually, you know, interact with those nodes. Cool. So that's all that. And then something else that just a tip that I want to add in. Since these are 3D, you know, nodes and stuff, the reason why I have in here when I go to delete a mask to say keep nodes or delete nodes is if I keep them, I can actually use these nodes now as like an alpha to control textures and stuff. So let's say, for example, I've scattered all this stuff, and this is all, you know, trees and foliage and stuff like that. I'll want my ground and stuff to have like a green texture underneath. I can use this scatter mask as a alpha to control a texture mask so that way, you know, I can have like a green ground texture here. And then what I can do is I can just invert it, and then I'll get all my rockier areas. And then I can just slab a rock texture on there, and now I have green where all my objects are spawned, and rocks where there's not. And so now I just have consistency between my textures and you know, the objects that I've scattered. Something that's really cool. That's just a tip that I've actually used so far. I've tested it out and it actually works pretty well. It's just something that's pretty neat. Just an added little feature that you can do. So that's the reason for having the keep nodes in there. Alright, cool. So I know that this video went on for a little bit longer, and I do apologize, but hopefully that gives you guys a solid rundown of how this masking tabs can work and how useful it can be. I'll do one last little demo here. If I go ahead and scatter, you'll see here. Cool. So now we just get objects right where that camera's seeing, and only on the flatter slopes. Cool. So that is it for this video, and next we'll delve into more of the settings here and go over the scatter tab more. Alright, cool. Thanks. See you guys in the next video.